Okay. Hi, everybody. Excuse me. And good evening. I notice among our group some brave ones, who have already been through a 2-hour dissipation of glamour webinar that ended less than an hour ago, and still you are back. So we dealt with the glamour of the fabrication of the false and the untrue, commonly known as lying, basically. It's rampant in the world today, and it's a very practical kind of work. When we deal with a book like A Treatise on Cosmic Fire, it's an altogether different thing. It's the great seminal book out of which so many of the other maybe more practical writings of DK emanated. We have in this particular book the seed of quite a number of DK's other books, psychology, astrology, initiation, of course, white magic, all those things, and more, of course. So what we're doing, and I hope that it's over about a 5-year period, is that we are going step by step in this book. And I've been trying to find a excuse me, a better time to work than to do 3 of these 2-hour webinars in one day. I think I was wearing everybody out, and maybe myself too, without knowing it. But at least on Friday, except when there are other issues going on, full moons and very special meditations and so forth, we'll do this at 8 o'clock p.m. And I have a feeling before long we'll have to change that, because we're going back out of summertime, and it may be more like, 9 o'clock p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. I'm trying to keep it possible for the people in Australia and New Zealand, and possible for the people in the United States, Canada, and South America. It's not always easy to find a convenient time for everybody, and that's why we are, of course, posting these videos on Makara. And if you go to Makara, I think you can pretty well find where they are. I don't have, right now, it's unusual, but I don't have any, I don't think I do anyway. No, I don't have any backup today. Either Joe or BL is usually here, but, everybody's busy for some reason or another, so I hope that everything can go smoothly. Now, look, a few weeks ago, we had our first Cosmic Fire session, and it was kind of a give and take, and people would ask questions, or they would say something or whatever. After that, I also had 4, I don't know what to call them, solo webinars, number 2, 3, 4, and 5. And they are listed on Makara, and webinar number 2, I have to find a good way to label them, but 2 and 3 finish off the introduction. I'm not sure we have to do that introduction any further right now together. I think you can get what you need from going to Makara, and what you'll find is that on Makara, things are listed in 2 ways. One is simply a written commentary on the pages, and that's been there for quite a while, but it's a bit hard for people to get into that, I think. and the other is the video commentary, which maybe makes it, a little more accessible. So I'm going to offer this kind of back and forth webinar, not a broadcast, a webinar, where you can talk, I can talk, we can exchange what we think. Excuse me. And every once in a while, I'll do one of those solo webinars when it looks like we don't have time to do a kind of an exchange webinar. This is an exchange webinar. So what I would suggest you do is you go to Makara and you listen to number 2 and number 3 in the Cosmic Fire session, video 2 and video 3. Video 1 is also there, but maybe you've participated. If you haven't participated, then please listen to video 1. I'm trying to go at this in depth. We have to realize that this is a book for initiates, and I can even see, just the way initiates or masters even are said to read and study the last 2 books of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Sometimes I look at what's in this book and I say, look, very high initiates could still benefit from studying these matters. But we don't have to pretend that we are like them. We can get a reflection of what they might understand and a reflection of what the book proposes to say, and it will be adequate to our needs. And that's the main thing. Now, what I'm going to begin with today is the basic text of Cosmic Fire, starting on page 3. And you will find, if you want to study it further, that in video number 4 and video number 5, I've already begun there and done kind of a solo intensive version of it. So you can get that. It just depends on how deeply you want to go, There's just no end to the depth of this book, and it just puts its lines of light out to all the other books. So, this is an experiment. Let's see what we can do. I've been away from talking to you about it for a couple, 3 weeks, just trying to find the right time to get back into it so we could all have a discussion. I also want to say that, this is the year of the new group of world servers. It's the festival week, and every 7 years that happens. Last time was 2012, and now 2019, and the festival week of the new group of world servers. There's going to be a lot of broadcasts, a lot of videos, and webinars during that time, but also we are holding an event here, a week-long event in Finland, in the Temple of Silence. It won't be so silent while we're talking, I guess, but you are most welcome to think about whether you would like to join us in person. I know to haul the body all that way to Finland, unless you're a European, is a long way. I know that. But perhaps it will be possible for some of you who live in Europe especially, and for the very brave who live elsewhere and have to take a long trip, it will perhaps be possible. So Tuya and I are sending out information about the schedule and the costs and, all kinds of things, a little bit about airplanes and all that. And we'll see, maybe some of you will join us in person. We're not looking for a lot of people, because basically it's really hard to handle a lot of people at our facility. But perhaps some would like to come and join us in person for that every 7-year event. Now, the next time it occurs will be Christmas time, more or less. It's always the 21st of December to the 28th. It's always that. And it always includes Christmas, including, for us, when we do it here, a kind of traditional Finnish Christmas. So let's see what can be done, and you can talk to us if you're really, really interested, and we can work things out. You know, we do have to charge something for it, of course, but we can work it out for you, I hope, in a way that will not be onerous, okay? All right, let's see, one more thing I wanted to say before we really get going. Tomorrow is Saturday. We're on the evening schedule. We'll be talking about the soul of nations. It's our big duty to evoke that soul of our own nation and thus help to evoke the soul of humanity. And then on Sunday, the usual broadcast, also evening, attracting financial resources for the work of the hierarchy because they are really needed. Well, okay, it's nice to see a lot of you here. I know that you'll be joining as we go. And as I say, some of you are really gluttons for punishment. You've been here already 2 hours and now another, maybe almost 2. We'll see how it goes. Just want to welcome you, Andrea, Anna, again. No, Anna, you're here first time, I think, and Anna Sklar, you were here before, and Antoinette. I won't mention all those who have been before. You know who you are. Asha, hi. Brennan, Bruno, Karsten, Catherine, Chris, Deborah, Diana, and Eric, Francis, and Francois. Whoops. Looks like we went to a different map there. And Heike, and Helena, and Iris, hi. And Jan and Joanne, and Jo-hee from South Korea, and Karen, Kim, Launa, great to see you here, Launa, Margot, Mariana, Marina, Mariut, and let's see, excuse me, I'm getting a little bit lost here. Mariut, Maribel, hi, Michael, Nicholas, Natni, and Nienke, Risto, Rose, and Tia, and Vile, and Zenaidi. And let's see, I don't know if I can do anything there, Tia, because I'm not backed up this time. But let's see if you wanted to. Your microphone is missing. I don't know what's going on there. Unfortunately, there you go. Okay, did you want to say something because you're self-muted? It's usually technical issues in the beginning, and I never handle them, thank goodness. But did you have something you wish to say? You're self-muted, or ask. I don't know if I can help you out of a jam. Let's see what's happening. Go ahead, Tia.
Oh, no, it was a mistake. Sorry.
You're okay. Okay, very good. Great, thank you. Terrific. Okay, and then I'm a staff of 1, so we'll see how this goes. Sometimes I go astray and I do a pantomime show here for you, and I don't know that I'm self-muted and all the rest of it. I'll get this stuff ready for you as soon as possible. I'll convert it so it can be played on any computer and maybe played on some telephones as well, I guess. And look, I know different people are joining us. I want to say hi to Risto there too, if I didn't. But I can only go through the list one time. All right. So, cosmic fire, it's the universe, And even though DK stays quite close to home, well, we wouldn't, DK says that even Sirius, which is only 8 light years away, is a tremendously distant star. So what do we do with those stars that are just hundreds of light years away, and with those galaxies that are millions of light years away, Anyway, that's one of the main things, is to know the level on which he is talking. He doesn't always say. Sometimes he can be inside the solar system. Sometimes he can be outside the solar system. Sometimes a universe means simply a solar system. And sometimes a universe means a galaxy. And sometimes a universe means the whole thing. The universe which has appeared in an infinite series of universes. So, we have to be sharp, and we have to see the context of what he's doing. And when Blavatsky was talking about these things as well, we had the same story. Sometimes she'd be right here on our planet, and the next thing you know, she'd be way out there in outer space, as far away as we could go. A lot of it has to do with the development of galactic theory, which maybe came in more accurately in the early part of the 20th century, and was not necessarily a part of the thinking of people before that time. What DK says is, when a human being intuits the truth about some mystery, let's say these are part of the astronomical mysteries, the hierarchy is obliged to confirm the intuition of truth. But the hierarchy is not obliged to offer ahead of time teaching which should be confirmed by human beings themselves first, or should be at least suggested, not before the time has come. So this is very interesting, because we're so far ahead on the fifth ray right now that the whole secret of atomic energy was not even supposed to be revealed during the Aquarian Age, 2,000 years ahead. It was going to be a mystery revealed during the age of Capricorn. But the fifth ray ashram was so bright, so luminescent, that it penetrated into that truth, and hierarchy indeed had to confirm it. So that's the rules by which they work. They work with the principle of freedom. We are to be left free as possible, to determine our path. And they, although they know the good, are not allowed to impose the good, because we would thereby lose ground rather than gain it, and we wouldn't really learn our lesson, or our lessons of the time. So when we get to that point, we'll learn what hierarchy must do. Now look, he says a lot of initiates of the fifth degree are soon to be needed. Now, without getting a big head about it, one can work assiduously towards the higher initiations, knowing that there is a tremendous need for higher initiates because of the state humanity is in. That doesn't mean that because we work, we're going to be excused from any one step. Everything has to be fulfilled, and it's all a graded process. But at least we know there's a tremendous need for higher initiates to help to guide humanity. Now, the average initiate reading DK's books is a probationary initiate, someone who has maybe taken the first initiation, and is in that long period, usually long period, between the first and second initiation, maybe 10 times longer than the second, third, and fourth. So, that was where his students were. The majority had not taken the second initiation. And we don't want to exaggerate anything about our progress, because that's the surest way to land into glamour and be misdirected, unfortunately. But even though this book is written for initiates of the third degree and beyond, we can gain, we can benefit, we can move towards the synthesis that is. So, it's an adventure, and it'll go on for some years. And as you know, my colleague Francis Donald is working very hard in a similar manner, reading The Secret Doctrine every month with students in a group like this, and also now undertaking the big, and I mean big, Manly Hall book. The Masonic, Rosicrucian, Kabbalistic, whatever of symbolic philosophy. That book is really big, and it's a wonderful book, and it gives all these different traditions by which the truth has been sought on all the many different rays, although maybe it doesn't mention the rays so much. All right. Anyway, good to see you here, and now we get going. And I see some new people that are here, and just welcome to you. That's all I can say. Now, every once in a while, I'll go back to one of these introductory postulates, but basically what I'll do is work from this particular webinar, and I think it says new webinar. Yeah, that's what it says. Okay, good. These are some of the things that I wrote some years ago, and of course people found it very dense, hard to penetrate, requiring intensive study. I've had cosmic fire classes in a lot of places, a couple in California, then Denmark, and then Australia, then New Zealand, and, around. But you can never stop studying this book, given the stage that we are in. So what I'll do, and we won't make a whole lot of pagination progress here, we're not going to. I can tell you that right ahead of time. I'll begin following the introduction. Like I say, you want the introduction, please listen to program video number 2 and video number 3. We've already started it, and the introduction was begun in video number 1. 1, 2, and 3 are all there if you missed that, and you'll get a sense of what Foster Bailey thought and what Alice Bailey thought as she was taking down the words of the Tibetan. And what strikes me, one of the things that really, really strikes me, is that she got a vision of huge vistas of truth, which were never written down in the book. The Tibetan's mind so elevated her mind that she could just see into things that it just would not be even profitable to write in the book. But she was able to get a glimpse of what it was all about. So this is the ABCs of occultism, even though it seems complicated and, difficult. And basically in the one book are many books. I think the Tibetan proved that. And in the one voluminous teaching of the Tibetan, many more strata could be added on, which would find their root in what he gave, but would be new and different and additional to what he gave. So I'm sure he studied for, centuries and centuries to know what he knows. All right, introductory postulates. That's where we are. Introductory postulates. The teaching which is given in this treatise on cosmic fire might be formulated in the following terms. The postulates are simply extensions, I guess he takes them a little further, of the 3 fundamentals to be found in the proem in the first volume of The Secret Doctrine by H.P. Blavatsky. And I think Francis did a good job of going over those. And there's a 4th fundamental, which is on the horizon and has a lot to do with astrology and psychology. Every once in a while, a student comes along and tries to formulate what it is. Are they close? Are they far? It's too early to tell. but that's the next thing to come up, and probably there's going to be 7 fundamentals of the secret doctrine. We have 3. Students are recommended to study these 3, study them carefully, and in this way their understanding of the treatise will be greatly aided. So basically what he's saying is this book is the psychological key to the secret doctrine, or at least it's along that line, and that's what he says. Now, just start there with the secret doctrine in one hand if you're a weightlifter, and a treatise on cosmic fire in the other hand, and, just look at them together. And it's the 3rd edition, the pagination to the secret doctrine, which is accurate, is in the 3rd edition of this 3rd edition of that book. So when he refers to the secret doctrine, he's referring to that particular edition. And maybe, I got a copy of it, but it's falling apart. And maybe if you're really, profoundly scholarly interested in it, you can get a copy of the 3-volume 3rd edition. Okay, so look, read the proem of the secret doctrine. It has a wonderful sense of what beingness really is. And when it all boils down to it, there's going to be nothing left of you but isness, beingness, be-ness. No word can capture it. You think you're this, you think you're that, and you find out you're pure being forever, and that it includes all things. So we're just at the beginning, and we'll see if we can grasp these fundamentals. And here is the first one as he puts it. So, just think meditatively a little bit here about this first fundamental. Probably you've read it, Probably you've read it many times. I don't know. Excuse me. There is one boundless, immutable principle. One absolute reality. Right there, that's a tremendous assertion. There is one boundless, immutable principle, one absolute reality, meaning it's never going to change. It's absolute forever, which antecedes, which means goes before, which antecedes all manifested, conditioned being, the being of things, the existence of things. First and forever came this one, the only one thing. Can't even call it a thing. Can't even, this is probably the best way to deal with it. It is beyond the range and reach of any human thought or expression. Well, right there, that puts us in our place, doesn't it? They mention it in the secret doctrine, and they're mentioning it here, but our minds can't reach that far, can't understand it. And as I've studied these things more and more, I've come to the conclusion that there's not a mind in the universe, even the mind of the universal Logos, which can understand this boundless, immutable principle. Now, I know that seems almost a preposterous statement because there's so many great beings, I'm saying, I can be proven wrong and all that, and I'm happy about that. Whatever is true, there's a galactic Logos. He's got 6 trillion solar logoi in its being, and it cannot understand the one boundless, immutable principle. Why do I say that? I say that for mathematical reasons, which I'm getting into in our webinars on Identify as Being. And basically, it has to do with the idea that when you compare any definite item to absolute infinitude, it's like dividing that singularity, that definite item, by absolute infinitude, and you get the absolute infinitesimal. Now, I don't want to, go too far off here on some kind of tangent, but basically, it's called an ever lessening, and it gets so small, so small, so small, without ever becoming zero, and all definite items, when divided by absolute infinitude, are the same size. Now, I know, a galaxy and an atom are the same size. That's crazy, right? But except those are some of the properties of infinity, especially absolute infinity. And as a result of that, even the greatest mind in our solar, in our universe, is a mite, a tiny little mite, compared to the vastness of absolute infinitude. Like Galileo said, look, you just can't understand it. He just pulled back from one of his thought experiments, and he just, he was shaken. He says, God cannot be understood. And he saw it in a diagram that he drew about two concentric circles, and I won't get into that too much, but suffice it to say, he got a surprise of his life, and he was shocked by the result, and his conclusion was God, the absolute God, cannot be understood. And then not only is there the absolute God, which I call the absolute deity, but there's the absolute itself, and that's infinitely more than the absolute God. So in the other class there, I'll get into that mathematics stuff if you're interested in it. You don't have to be a mathematician or even good in math. These are just higher mind concepts, that's all. And we're all trying to build that rainbow bridge to the higher mind, so it's a good workout. So anyway, we're not going to really know the nature of the boundless immutable principle. If it had any boundary whatsoever, it could be, in a sense, divided into this and that. And the one thing we seem to know about it is it is completely, utterly without division. It's homogeneous. And although it's the root of everything, that everything is just a Maya. And when I use the word Maya, I mean, yeah, you experience it, but it's an illusion. It's not the final reality. Now, none of us is going to walk around experiencing the final reality, but we're going to get hints about oneness. We're going to get hints about something that you cannot divide, and that we are all that something, which ultimately I call, and other people call, the no thing. Okay? So it's the nameless one in a way, even though that didn't stop me from trying to give it a name. My names were like little approaches around well, there's no such thing as around, none of that. But I came up with 241 names for this nameless one, a bit quixotic, like Don Quixote. He was charging at windmills. It's kind of a metaphor for doing something that's useless. But I think I learned something from it, and if you want to see it, you go to Makara and Makara.us, and I've got in my Infinity book, I've got this, and you may find some of these names suggested. So it's the no thing. The boundless immutable principle is the no thing, but it's not nothing. That's really important. It is beingness to the hilt. It is, what do I call it? Utter utterness. To the hilt it is, as far as it can go. But you can't even use words like far and near and all that. It has no center, and yet it centers everywhere. Suffice it to say that it's not until the universe disappears once again that we're going to have any kind of real idea or experience of what the nameless one really is, yet alone that we are that nameless one, every one of us, without being divided in the least. So there's no you and me and this and that and all the rest of it. It's just one utterness. I don't know what word to use because you can't use words, okay? But remember this. The no thing is not nothing. Nothing, in a way, doesn't exist. Because if you think of nothing, you've immediately made it a perception. I mean, it's impossible to cognize nothing. Because in cognizing nothing, it is something. So let's just say when Spinoza, the great Dutch philosopher, dealt with all this, he talked about the absolute infinite deity, which did not contain negation. In other words, nothing was not a part of that. There is no nothing ever, but there is the no thing. All right. It's a paradox. I once called it the great paradox. It's the supreme mystery, and you and I are it forever. Now, we usually look in the mirror and say, what you see is what you get. This is it. This is who I am. This is my body. This is how I feel about things. This is how I think about things. But that's a false I. That's a temporary, illusory, Mayavic, from Maya, I. And we got to deal with that over and over again, It's always different, and every I is every other I, But it's not who we really are. And that's the hard thing to grasp, because you have to remove, and we have meditations for this, you have to remove a lot of boundaries around your self-perception. Get rid of all those vehicles, at least in your imagination, and then come closer to the essence of things. And meanwhile, while you're doing that, keep on studying with very sharp intensity books like Cosmic Fire and The Secret Doctrine, and everything that tells you what's going on in the relative world. So if you want to read my book, Infinitization of Selfhood, I have some different ideas now, but that's the way it is. When you're an author, you change your mind. I deal with the matter exhaustively, and it certainly exhausted me. And, it's a book that will open doors and keep them open as a door opener, a door stopper. I once thought I may be able to count the readers of that book on one hand, or maybe two, if I was feeling optimistic that particular day. So anyway, sometimes we call it the, I just want to get to the end of this so I can open the floor up without it being a sinkhole about anything you might like to say or question. But as I say, we're dealing with the first fundamental of the secret doctrine, the boundless, immutable. It means it never changes forever. You know what that means? That's an amazing thing. It is the ultimate, whatever, forever. So sometimes I call it, some people, try to symbolize it, but all you can do is just not write anything down. And sometimes when I'm talking about it, I just leave a space, sometimes with quotation marks around the space, but even that's not so good. Basically, it cannot be limited in any way. And quotation marks are limitations, okay? I call it absolute zero. Nagarjuna, he was the Tibetan's teacher a long time ago, and he was Master Kutumi. The Tibetan was Arya Sangha in those early Buddhist days, a great meditator who met Lord Maitreya in the Tushita heaven. I mentioned that in the earlier group. Nagarjuna said that the absolute cannot create. It can only be. It can only be the ultimate. And does it really become illusion? Well, that's one of the great mysteries. Illusion seems to arise from it and go back into it, but it always remains exactly what it is. So it seems like it can sort of become, but if it becomes, can it be immutable? That's one of those big paradoxical questions. So somehow in this great infinity, which is somehow the first differentiation from the absolute, part of that infinity has to become a universe. I go with the idea that the universe is not infinite. Otherwise, the great breath would be a lie. And I trust that there is a great breathing, which is the foundation of all periodicity. Breathe in, breathe out. No universe, universe. No universe, universe, and but I'll even try to show that that is not real at some point. The only thing that's ever real forever is the absolute. So there are paradoxes here, and in my book, Infinitization, I list the problems of philosophy that are encountered when you deal with these subjects. As I said, I call this thing, whatever it is, the great paradox. Let's see if there's anything else here before we just pause a moment. By the way, one of the things that I thought is really interesting is that the very lowest type of human being and the very highest type of reality have the same name. Now, we do not believe that the Hindu caste system should be perpetuated as a rigid kind of thing. It's more a metaphor for how people evolve. There's the Brahmins, and then there's the warriors, and then there's the merchants, and then there's the Sudras, the the untouchables. They are so low that those proud Brahmins and others would not even touch them lest they get contaminated. But the fascinating thing is that the word untouchable applies exactly to this absoluteness that we all are, this beingness. I sometimes like to use the simple word, this isness that we all are. Okay? It's isness. And since there's no other isness than isness, there's nothing to touch anything else. Okay? It's untouchable. And Tibetan has here something here in this book called Discipleship, Volume 2, page 284. And it gives you the idea, and he gives you the 6 stanzas that are at the root of all philosophy. And look at it's all about God, and God in this case is the one being. That's what it means here. And at the end of it all, being cries forth and says, and of course it's in some amazing other language that cannot be put into English, death crumbles all, existence disappears, yet all for A, that means forever, yet all for A remains, all for A remains untouched immutably the same. God is. And the is pretty big. So untouched, that's amazing, because there's nothing else to touch it. So all of us are the one untouchable, not just those who have fallen down into a low state of humanhood. As long as there's no boundary, you need a boundary to get something else, you know. If you want two instead of one, you need a boundary, and this is the boundless immutable principle, untouched, immutably the same, and that's you forever. Now, how do you remember that when you're having a tough time and a hard day and you're depressed and life could look better? And you have to remind yourself of the fundamental realities that are underneath, that substand, that support all the illusions that we deal with on a daily basis. We're here in the world of illusion, and for the life of me, I just can't think of the universe as anything but the great illusion. DK uses the term in different ways, and he means illusion closer to home, and the mistakes of the mind and the mistakes of human consciousness and all that. But from a very superior point of view, the whole universe itself, compared to absolute reality, is the great illusion. Even though it's a necessary illusion, a cyclic illusion, and has been with us forever and will be with us forever, and we have the habit of becoming universes. We, the one, have the habit forever of becoming universes. So, reading that again, if you can, you know, I know this is pretty abstract stuff, I know that. If you can stand it. There is one boundless, immutable principle, one absolute reality which antecedes, goes before, all manifested, conditioned being. It is beyond the range and reach of any human thought or expression. And I've explained why I think, because everything is so small compared to the absolute infinity, why it's beyond the reach of any thought whatsoever of any being, however great, because it is beingness itself. Okay, now rather than just grind on, which I'm perfectly capable of doing, we've spent 45 minutes and read one sentence. So, but it's an important sentence. So, is there anybody that would care to ask a question, make a statement, write down something? If you want to ask a question or have a verbal statement, then raise your hand. Otherwise, if you want to write in the little box that allows statements and so forth in written form, just press your question mark, and you can find the way to do that. The thing about occultism, it always begins at the top. Real occultism, it's a deductive in a sense. Now, that doesn't mean induction is a bad thing. You study all the particular cases, and then somehow you intuit where they all came from, the principle from which they all came, by studying the many. But here you start at the top, and then you study all the divisions which come from the top. Even though there's no top and bottom, you know what I mean. So, oftentimes when I look at this stuff, it takes my breath away. I don't even know what to say. And maybe there's nothing to say. Einstein said here, he said that all the equations we have generated, all of our experiments, have no bearing on reality. I thought that was really interesting, along with the laughable fact that in 1912, the Royal Academy of Science disbanded itself because all had been discovered. This is human presumption. It's pretty funny. Anybody want to say anything or ask anything or about this? This is the top, the boundless, immutable principle which we forever are, without distinction from one another or from anything, without division, an absolutely smooth, I don't know, you use those words like that, absolutely smooth substance or substantiality or something that just has no divisions in it whatsoever, and therefore, philosophically, has no extension. You can't say it goes this far and not farther, or it only goes this far. Space is negated. The absoluteness, the absolute negates space. There's no space. And I'll try to show later that it negates time too, as well. Time is an illusion. But it's an illusion in which we live and suffer over and all the rest, and we have to learn how to withdraw ourselves from those mistaken perceptions. Maybe you would prefer that I just go on a little, because I know if I was asked to say something here, I don't know what I'd say. But you know, this is the key to all grief and suffering, to the end of all grief and suffering, and as well the usual kind of happiness. It's the end of all that, because all those separate things that make us happy or unhappy and all that, none of it really exists, except in, it's actual. We have to deal with it forever, and we have to do a good job of it, but it's not real. So, we are forever dealing with the great Maha Maya, which is the universe, and one universe after another. Unless we negate time, and would find a way to do that too. Look, I figure this way. If you don't read Cosmic Fire and feel happier about yourself, then something's wrong. Now, I know it's a tough way to feel a sense of well-being, but it gets us down to the root of things. In all these mystery traditions, the East, the Taoism and Brahmanism and Hinduism and more from the Middle East and Zoroastrianism, and you just name these, Egyptian approach, and then before that Atlantean approaches got under the priest kings, and Lemurian approaches under the great initiates who guided all that, not the people themselves. They weren't there yet. It's all the same truth. And no matter what we do in the world, and we have to fulfill our partial little destiny. We have to do it. It's what we do. Still, this sameness of the boundless, immutable principle exists. And that's what we are. I mean forever, without beginning and without end. And in the same way as that you, this is a tough one, but you can't say that it has space and extension and it's this far and it's that far and beyond that there's nothing and blah, blah, blah. You can't do that. And the same is true with time. We have to prove, to end the first stage of the great illusion, that time itself doesn't really exist. And trouble is you have to have the time to do it. You have to have the time to research timelessness. But the consciousness is a strange thing, you know, and we're mostly dealing with what some of the psychologists have called the middle unconscious, or the middle consciousness. You know, it's kind of like everyday consciousness, and we can't go too deep into the past. We don't know how yet, though it's said that in the new esoteric schools it will be taught how to do this. I'd just love to see all of you in one of those new esoteric schools when the time is right. And we're not into the superconscious either. And the superconscious is just like almost endless. It seems endless in this universe. But the first thing is to, you know, meditate so we get a connection with our own angel of the presence, with our own soul, you know, the extension of the solar angel. We build the Antakarana, we understand a little something about the cosmic ethers, which are, you know, up, what can I say here? Up here instead of down here. It's the four above the three. We can start this road that we've trodden more times than we can specify, which is another definition for infinity. But every time it's different, and every time conditions are different, and the algorithm of the universe is different, and the archetype of the universe is different, and it's always an ongoing adventure, which I think has been entirely foreseen within absolute infinitude. In other words, we don't know what the members of a universe are going to do, but what they might do is already done in absolute infinitude. So, you know, when you get into these big, big thoughts, you can just feel lost and all the rest of it. But, you know, you come down to it, the old saying, God's in his heaven and all's right with the world. And, you know, we're going to learn that this is, that bliss is the normal state of the spirit, no matter how much we've suffered under the great heresy of separateness. That's our problem, the separateness, you know. If you don't have the synthetic perception, there's no approach to bliss, not even to joy, maybe a little happiness here or there, and it's very fleeting. So there's only one actor, it's us, and there's no you and me in it. We are just, it's just it, you know. So anybody, as I say, that wants to, okay, here's a question. Usually the person who's backing me up helps me not overlook things, but I can. How can one possibly say anything except that I know nothing? Well, you know, it's a good kind of statement by the mystics of the European type. DK said there was a special group of mystics that came in around, I don't know, maybe 1000 AD, maybe before a little, I'm not sure. And they are particularly connected with the planet Neptune. And they are of a very high nature in terms of their ability to sort of sense. But the kind of knowing that they get into is not this articulated, concrete-minded knowing. Now, once when I was in the University of Michigan Library, I always would go to the, excuse me, I'd always go to the place where the mystical books were hanging out. It wasn't a good sign. Somebody in pre-med like I was, you had to really use the concrete mind. But I soon put that illusion to rest and got into something much more real, like opera. So, okay, I found a book from Jan von Rysbroek. I don't know how to say it. We have a man from Holland here, somewhere here, I think. Anyway, the name looked like Rysbroek, something like that. And it was called The Cloud of Unknowing. It was written by a very, very high mystic, and he was basically saying that the knowledge as it is in God is everything compared to the knowledge as humanity understands it. So we can say many things about the relative world in the curriculum of divisions and relativity. We can say nothing about absolute reality, and we can say we know nothing yet in our limited, cramped condition about absolute reality, but we can say because we're on the path of return, which means that our monad is rising higher and higher and higher. I always like, what do I like here? I like this particular picture. The monad is rising. There it is. It's called Parabrahm. Rising higher and higher and higher. And we're on the path. I call it, okay, it's a fancy name, but I call it emanative retraction. Now, we were, on the path of emanative descent, and we got smaller, until we stopped, according to the will of the deity that sent us forth. And then we start to retrace our steps. The prodigal son says, look, even the pigs in my father's house eat better than I do. It's time to go home. So, uh-oh. Okay, test. Yes, okay, good. I had a break there. It said my audio shut off. So I hope that doesn't happen again. It looks like it's okay for the moment. We go back on the path that we descended upon. And we find out, finally, every step of the way, a veil is lifted. A veil. There's so-called in history the dance of the seven veils. It is very sort of metaphysical. The seven veils, of course, are the seven planes and the seven vehicles which surround the essence of consciousness, the essence of being. So, indeed, we know more and more. But to know the no thing, you can never know the no thing because it implies the knower and the known. And there's no division in the no thing. So all you can do is be it. And there comes a time when everything sent forth into illusion returns into the one and only no thing, and then isness, beingness, in the most intense degree possible, takes over, and we are that and everything else. Now, if you want to call that knowing, we can, but there's no division between subject here I am, and there's the object, there's the computer. There's no division. So I'm confident that we'll learn a little bit along the way with every step. And I'm confident that everybody not turning this webinar off after 2 minutes is on the path of return. Meaning it's not so much that you're interested in what the world and the flesh and the devil have to offer. You know, speaking of the three states that the Christ fought in the desert, or at least symbolically fought, because he had overcome those things. Anyway, it's not those things you want. What you really want is the one and only self which you are. I am the seeker and the sought. Now that's under the sixth ray pattern. I am the seeker and the sought. I rest. It says. As a matter of fact, if you really want to get a beautiful thing here, and something that you can reflect on for a long time. I am the seeker and the sought. In other words, I am what I've been looking for, you know. Here it is. I am the seeker and the sought. I rest. Now, with every one of these rays, there's something beautiful said about reality, at least within the universe. It's enough at first to deal with reality or the most intense degree of actuality within the universe. Maybe in the universe you can never get real reality. You know, that's only in one state, which we call absoluteness, but you can get closer and closer and closer. And that's the purpose of our studies, of our meditation, so that even while we know everything, we also know the path to the no thing, which does not mean necessarily that we know nothing, except inside the no thing, and there is no inside, okay? Then what you say is correct. There's nothing that can be known. You can only be, which includes knowing, loving, and every other psychological state and state of consciousness. I am the seeker and the sought, I rest. And, you know, you may recognize this one because I use it all the time. Naught is but me. And that's the one from the second ray. Naught is but me. And that's a huge statement. And if you go around, walk around your house or take a walk or look at everything and use this mantra, you'll find that it can have profound effect. So this is mentioned 3 times, and here we are, Esoteric Psychology, Volume 1, page 417. What I would recommend, friends, make sure that you have the Alice A. Bailey CD-ROM. And if your computer doesn't take a CD-ROM, then buy a little external player for 30 or 40 bucks, and you can play the Alice Bailey CD-ROM. It's the best way to study that we have. It certainly supersedes by hundreds of times the books per se. Okay, is there anything else? Now, usually I ask Joe or I ask BL to find something for me, but in this particular case, I'm on my own. So anything that you would like to say or question? Look, you know, we're not going to become we're not going to become absolutely enlightened in this life. We're not. Even the Buddha, in his life 2,500 years ago, achieved the 6th initiation and touched the cosmic mental plane. And was he totally enlightened? Absolutely not. He was not totally enlightened. He just had a really wonderful experience on this level. And look at all the levels beyond and beyond and beyond. until the 10 dimensions of cosmos are fulfilled. So we might as well enjoy the foreverness of this journey. Sometimes when I'm in a bad mood, I should remind myself of my own words, enjoy the foreverness of this journey, which, well, it never began and never will end, and yet it is. Now, maybe I'll say just a couple of more things. Like I say, we're not going to cover a lot of pages. That's not the point. That's not the point. The point is to have a very deep grounding in what might be meant by some of these grand statements. Now, this is, in a way, one of the most material books that DK ever wrote. And for the first 100 pages or so, you'll see why. He gets into fire by friction, and he says, look, this isn't even the most popular part of the book. No, not by a long shot, because people are much more interested in the fire of the soul. Solar fire, that's what they're interested in. So that's going to be the very, very big second part of the book. It's a wonderful, wonderful part of the book. And then just a little bit at the end, not many pages at all, he talks about electric fire, the fire of the spirit, okay? So our main focus these days is on the fire of the soul, the fire of consciousness. Whether our life is happy or unhappy in the personal sense, as long as we expand our consciousness, we have made a gain. And if our life is no problem, everything was easy, I solved it all, just like that, without having to think about anything, then we have not gained. We've just functioned in the world of materiality successfully, without a real gain to consciousness. So, that's hard. And it relates to the old saying, which is kind of a humorous one, that, and it involves astrology. And some of you know that in astrology, traditionally, the 120-degree aspect is called a trine. Everything's great. And the squares and the oppositions, everything is trouble to the personality. But the saying goes, and it turns everything upside down, is that the personality loves trines, and the soul loves squares and oppositions, which is a lot like Master Moria saying something almost preposterous. He says, hey, the worse the better. The worse the better. How can you deal with that? The worse the better. Okay, but he knows what he's talking about in the process of being disillusioned. Now, our manifested universe is contained within this absolute reality, because it's not contained as an articulated something. It's just that isness literally is everything. Everything that can ever be in absolute infinity, isness is that. So, if we want to use poor English words here, we can say contained. The manifested universe is the absolute reality, is contained within the absolute reality, and a conditioned symbol of it. Well, that really requires some investigation, because, every universe is different. You're not just repeating the same thing. It's all, in absolute infinity, you wouldn't have to repeat the same thing. It's just as endless and has been endless forever. And that's a mystery. So it can be questioned, I say, whether the symbol reflects the unknown whole or only the merest fragment of the whole. Because, absolute infinity, what can you say about it? Let's just say that our finite universe is not going to be a total reflection of that. Does it ever fully manifest? I don't know. It manifests in a super universal world above and beyond any universe. But that gets very metaphysical, and you say, why should I be interested in that? Well, are you interested in yourself? Because that's you. I always say that's the reason to be interested in it. And one day again, the revelation comes, I've become all this Maya. Not I created the Maya, I've become it. Repeatedly, forever. So, my conclusion is that only an infinitesimal fragment of this boundless whole in articulation, absolute infinity, I just call it by a fancy name, boundless whole in articulation as absolute infinitude, which is just another way of saying absolute infinity. Only a tiniest little bit is reflected in any universe. Who knows the timing? How long a universe is supposed to last? Maybe it lasts until it gets done, until the archetype that is sustained in the mind of the universal logos actually is worked out on all levels. We don't know, but it's plenty of time for us, indeed. So anything additional to the boundless immutable principle, whether, it's the absolute deity and his self-reflection, absolute infinitude, or whether it's a universe or whatever it is, it's all manifestation in a sense. It's not the ultimate reality. So if you like ultimates, or the idea that maybe you can have some little touch of what is ultimate, then this idea of the boundless, immutable principle will be appealing to you. It doesn't mean we understand anything, really, about it, except that it's the only thing that is. And then he goes on and says, in the totality of this manifested universe, three aspects are to be conceived. Well, the numbering starts up there with the one universal logos that divides into three and so forth. We're not just talking about manifestation. Here's a cup of tea, here's a mouse, here's a light. No, all of this is the manifested universe. All of it, even super subtle areas that we can't even touch for I don't know how many trillions of years, as we head back to the universal logos that sent us forth, that we are. All this is so subtle, but it's manifested. And this is just the beginning. This is a physical plane, a super cosmic physical plane, and there's 6 more on top of this one. And then when you combine those 7, there's 6. That's just a physical plane too. It's not just a cosmic map, not just a super cosmic map, but it is a super cosmic map, and on it goes for 10 dimensions. So it's pretty big. pretty big, and yet there's no size at all. So you got to get used to the idea of paradox. Now, paradox usually means two things, and this contradicts that, so they can't both be true. And yet you say, wait, but they are both true. How can they both be true when they contradict each other? But that's something we learn along the way, that even the things that contradict each other can be simultaneously true. And that kind of sets normal human logic on its head, upside down, and you say, well, this doesn't make sense, and this is nonsense, and all that. But in occultism, we have to learn to think in a different way. And that kind of changes your mind. It changes your mind from its usual preconceptions, its usual prejudices. Einstein didn't have a whole lot good to say about common sense. The Tibetan is much more sanguine, happy about common sense, but Einstein said, well, what's common sense? It's just the accumulation of all prejudices up to the age 17, something like that, or 18, In other words, you're just getting out of your teenage years, all the prejudices, which means the unexamined assumptions. You never looked into it, but you just assume it's true because someone said it's true. That's common sense, and you measure everything against that. Well, there's a lot of that, to be sure. And what is it called? It's called our conditioning. Now remember, we're dealing with something that's not conditioned at all. There's no conditions in it at all. We're dealing with something beyond the universe and how it becomes the universe. How we, you and I, not separate, became every universe while not being the universe at all in the ultimate sense. Paradox. And that's why sometimes I call the boundless immutable principle the great paradox. Okay, so it sort of divides into three parts. Three parts are to be conceived. And, there's things here to read if you want to. I don't want to go too deep into it. But what I have done here is I've set up a chart about the three aspects of divinity. And look, you have these three aspects of divinity even in your body. Your head is your head. First aspect, your torso is your torso. Second aspect, and your arms and hands and your legs and feet. Third aspect. 1, 2, 3. We are the 1, 2, 3, always. And then you can divide us even more if you have the notion to do so. So, we hear in the Hindu, is it called Trimurti? Yeah. Shiva, the destroyer, Vishnu, the preserver, Brahma, the creator. So, first aspect, Shiva, second, Vishnu, and the third, Brahma. And it's the same in the Christian world. Father, Shiva, Son, Vishnu, Holy Ghost, Brahma. I had one other, it's the same in the Kabbalah. Kether, first aspect. Chokhmah, second aspect. And, Chokhmah, Kether, Binu. Oh gosh, I'm forgetting what it is. Anyway, it begins with a B. It's the feminine and it's the third aspect. Bina, I think it's what it is. So the first aspect, it creates and sustains and then stops, beginning and end. Second aspect, it's the pattern maker. It's the ray of the divine pattern. And the third aspect is that busy doer, And when it's reflected way, way down in human behavior, we have the third-rate types running around doing. And DK says to the glamour types among them, rush not from point to point, nor be deceived by that which passes away and is unreal. So all of these very high things, they have a reflection way down in our world. Now, he's not taking into consideration yet rays 4, 5, 6, and 7. But this is, the way to look at this is ray 1 is itself, ray 2 is itself, ray 3 is itself. First, second, and third aspect. Ray 4 is a combination of the second and first aspect. Ray 5 is a combination of the first and third aspect. Ray 6 is a combination of the fourth and of the second and third aspect. And ray 7 equal parts of all the first three. I've written that out in a lot of different places. But remember, ray 4 is 1 and 2, ray 5 is 1 and 3, ray 6 is 2 and 3, and ray 7 is 1, 2, and 3 in equal measure. And the pure types are ray 1, ray 2, and ray 3. So this is, in the first aspect, it's called the first logos, second logos, third logos, you see that. And then you see something interesting here about the life waves. You know, creation didn't happen all at once, and the foundation of matter was built up before the pattern maker could come in. Look, in other words, matter and form are not the same thing. Now think about that for a second. Matter and form are not the same thing. Ray 3 is the matter maker. The tiny little particles that are forms in themselves, of course, but they go to the construction, the geometry of the second aspect, who's called the great geometrician. And he takes all of these little things and makes greater geometrical forms. Matter of fact, if you ever read, well, you know, get into the book First Principles of Theosophy. He was the head of the Theosophical Society back in the 20s. His name was Jinarajadasa. First Principles of Theosophy. It's really good, and it's foundational. And then if you want to go deeper into it, Annie Besant and C.W. Leadbeater, who both had the serpent at the forehead, you know, they could observe. They have the book Occult Chemistry. And you just see how much geometry is there. God geometrizes, especially the second aspect of deity. So basically, what happens here is that I hope I've got this, the life wave. The third life wave comes first, all the matter making. The second life wave, making the patterns of things and attaching the permanent atoms and all that, comes second. And the first life wave, which is monadic and lifts you up into being, even though it's the first, it comes third. Now, you see that in our life, in our incarnation. We're very material at first, and we deal with the world as presented, and then we start to feel something else, and let's call it the soul and the unity and the connectedness and the love, all that. That comes later. Not many of us are dealing with the monad yet. As a matter of fact, we're hardly dealing with the spiritual triad yet. And you know what I mean here. the spiritual triad. This. We're lucky if this is what we're trying to do first. Open up the soul, open up the higher consciousness on the higher mental plane. That's our first thing. And then after that, we build the rainbow bridge and open this triangle up. And finally, at a very high initiation, probably the sixth, we begin to open the monad as our major center. But then again, we destroy this triangle and we go up into the flames of the sea of fire. This is our future, you know. Somebody says, hey, well, what's your future? What are you going to do? What are you going to be? Well, eventually you're going to escape from matter form in the lower parts and enter the world of being. And you're right up there. Enter the world of being. That lies ahead for every one of us. And the great sages, they knew this, and they found different ways to symbolize it. You know, the Egyptians were particularly good. They had this priestly language, this hieroglyphics, and they were able symbolically, with their sort of rays 1, 4, and 7, to depict this gradual liberation of the spirit. Oh, you and I are not yet in a liberated state. If we had destroyed our causal body for the right reasons, we would be liberated into the triad. And gradually we would be liberated into the temple of Ezekiel, which is the monadic temple. So all kinds of adventures lie ahead of us, and they are real. And we're going to travel that way if we are wise enough to follow the path of spiritual occultism. Now, eventually, every human being will be lifted to the place where that human being must go. But that's not the same as treading the path of initiation. That is done under a special condition of will and determination. And I don't know how many do it, but maybe not the majority. And by traveling on that directed, willed path, a much more rapid unfoldment occurs, not because we want to say, oh, I'm there and you're not, but because we want to help. And we can't help unless we reach reach the point where we can help, you know. I just am so amused by one of the students of the Tibetan. I just keep on trying to find the reference. I know I didn't dream it. And he said, Master, use me, Master, you know. And the Tibetan said, well, what makes you so sure you're useful? I thought, well, I guess he's saying, get yourself trained, you know, train yourself now, and then we can really use you. And you know what? When I was in the Arcane School back in 1980, it's almost 40 years now, I went there to New York with my family. Boy, I dragged them across the country. Anyway, I had an interview with Mary Bailey, and we talked about a lot of things, and she asked me my motive, and I said, well, I guess I want to be useful. And she says, well, you know, that's just what Foster always used to say, her husband, Foster Bailey, at least let me be useful. Well, I never forgot that. I thought, whatever we do, it may not be especially dramatic or noteworthy or whatever, but let it be of some use in helping other people and making sure the divine plan precipitates as it should. So, first Logos, God the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. That's the Christian method. Now, this is interesting. First Logos, time. You see Father Time there. He's holding the sickle, that cuts things down. Space, Jupiter, second aspect, and motion related to Mercury and the third aspect, and to Saturn and so forth. Time, of course, is Saturnian as well. It has the first and third ray, time, space, and motion. Then there are a lot of these other little, well, I shouldn't call them little, they are subdivisions of beings. We hear of the seven sons of Fohat, and they handle the material world. We also hear of seven rays, cosmically considered, and they handle the psychological world. And then there's this peculiar group called the seven spirits of darkness, and they handle the world of being. Those spirits of darkness also are divided into 49, 49, 49. You're coming up with 147 finally, and then you just add the synthesis and you get your 150, which is, by the way, a number associated with the Kumaras. Every number has its meaning, and the great beings in cosmos might as well be called numbers, and every human being is known by his number. Then we go to Hinduism, Sat, Ananda, and Chit. You see a lot of these yogi types, their name is Satchidananda, Satchidananda, Swami Satchidananda. There is such a person, and there are many. He was in California, and he was quite a teacher of people, but Sat is the first ray. Ananda is bliss, second. And Chit is the mind stuff, that's the third. And getting back to the Tibetan, will, love, and intelligence, of course, spirit, soul, and body. So that's a little assemblage of assembling what the first three aspects can be, or are meant to be. And there's many, the Tibetan, in his footnotes, you want number 4, here's a big footnote. You want number 10, here's a big footnote. Number 5, number 3, whatever. You can find those things. And he lists how those numbers are applied in the universe of many things. And it's fascinating. It's fascinating to see the application of the various numbers from 1 to 10, mostly, and then later come the composite, numbers, the larger numbers that are based on the basic integers, 1 through 9, 1 up till 10, when it all starts going again. Well, I've said this before, when you deal with Blavatsky, and she uses a term like universe, it's even so with the Tibetan. What's she talking about? Is it the biggest big? Is it the galaxy? Is it just our solar system? Your context will tell you. In this chart we've just been looking at, we're dealing with the manifestation of a solar logos. Go to the, I'll try to find something here. Take a look here. Here's the solar logos, and here's the 3 cosmic logoi, in a way. 1, 2, and 3, and they're all interlocked. All these diagrams and the geometry. We thank Keith Bailey for this one. He colored it in and gave the appropriate aspects and so forth. The map is from the Tibetan, but it helps to see the colors, and it helps trace where things are going. So the first 3 aspects of divinity are cosmic logoi, in a way, even though they are subsidiary to the solar logos. They're all powerful beings, and each one of them contains 3 great planetary logoi. But I won't get into that right now. We'll get into that in a few years. Okay, so usually with Blavatsky and sometimes with the Tibetan, you can apply what they say to a solar system or to a galaxy or the universe as a whole. But they're very slippery, and they don't stay in one place very long, and you have a different context all the time. So it doesn't always mean the whole thing. When you hear the word universe, look, a galaxy is an island universe. That's what they call it. An island universe. And a solar system sometimes as well. So sometimes they're literal and sometimes they're symbolic. So, when we're talking about the three logoi, we can talk about a solar system, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, or we can, let's just say if I was to look at this particular map, Tuya did a good job coloring these things, we can talk about the major three which be surrounding this supreme type of being called a cosmic para-Brahman. And it's so high up there, that we're not going to be concerned with that for a long, long time. Even our masters and all that, they're not concerned with these beings yet. They can't be. They're just on the way. Soon, after they leave the path of Earth's service, they're on the way of higher evolution, and they're going to some constellation. Maybe it's the Great Bear, maybe it's the Little Bear, maybe it's Orion, maybe it's the Pleiades, maybe it's Draco the Dragon. I mean, they're going to a constellation before it all ends, until it begins again, in the Pleiades, which is this green triangle. So like I say, we here on Earth, we people of little minds, we make up stories, and they're about the nature of man, and those stories are super limited in terms of what we really are and where we're going. And of course, the mind nature of the average person seeking a great security from all the insecurities around will fight you if you try to introduce that which is more real and more expansive, because it's a threat. How do I handle that? I had it all locked up. I've got my Bible, I've got my Jesus, I've got my heaven. Okay, I've got my Quran, I've got my Muhammad, I've got my paradise. And thus it goes all around, that we fixate on our limitations and are very happy. We don't call them limitations, we call them final truth, to which nothing can be added, and we're home safe forever. Okay, well, we grow out of that. Thank goodness. And people in this group and these Bailey groups and so forth, they're growing out of that childish attitude. And you kind of want to help people, see the light a little bit, but you don't think that you're necessarily going to get a lot of thanks for it right away. You might get the book thrown at you, and you might be repudiated, you might be kicked out, you might, anything can happen. You might become the scapegoat. Anything can happen. So limitation does not reward larger truth when presented, often. But then, School of Hard Knocks, you wake up to it and you realize, I've been laboring in limitation for too long a time, and I'm thirsty, I'm hungry for the truth. And then along comes someone like the Tibetan, the messenger for the hierarchy at this time, and he gives us what we need of the next step towards truth. Well, I think, let me just see this here. I may be experiencing degraded audio. It doesn't like my voice. Okay, whatever. I think this is sort of the, what is a cosmic logos? Well, there's lots of different ways to look at it. And as a matter of fact, if you look at the big map, the really big one, it's this one, biggest map he's given us, and you begin to understand how he works. Now, if our sun, our solar logos, is, I'll find it. I'll find it. Tiny compared to one of these stars, there's no way that you can read this sentence literally. And that's the Tibetans' method of blinding. If you pick it up, good for you. Otherwise, you're in trouble. The 7 rishis of the Great Bear being the 7 centers in a solar logos. Okay. Right away, you understand that the word solar logos is a movable term and can never be applied just to our sun or some other star. As a matter of fact, in this particular case, these solar logos they're talking about is what's called an unknown deity, or the one about whom naught may be said. And if you wonder about that, just throw that in, from page Treatise Sun Cosmic Fire, page 293. Oops, that's 298. Let's get 293. There it is. The Great Bear is a cosmic logos. So what is the being in which it is just a center? And I think we'll find that the unknown here is the being in which the Great Bear is a chakra, or provides 7 chakras. So look, get used to a new method of understanding language, that's all. And realize that it can't all be literal. Like the concrete mind, it's this, only this, and it's not that. These terms are moved around all the time. Universe, solar logos, the unknown, the one about whom not may be said, how many are there? They are moved around, and you've got to be sharp to see in what context you may be talking. What's your context? Okay, so, enough. This is the end of A Treatise on Cosmic Fire, in depth, hopefully. Number 5, and we're starting on number 6, and I don't know if I've done number 6 yet. I don't think so. Something's wrong, but I'll get to it. And right now, before leaving, these big, broad abstractions, I want to also open the floor up again and say, okay, look, end of A Treatise on Cosmic Fire, number 7. And we'll say second group webinar. And our date for doing this is the 18th of October. And it's not a solo webinar. It's a group webinar. And we're going to begin. If we do this together, it'll be either number 6 or number 8, depending on whether it's done solo or it's done together in 1 week's time, provided I survive this schedule. I just figured out I could be talking all day and night and not get done what I want to comment on that might be useful to you, and certainly to me looking at it over and over again. Is there anybody that would like to ask a question, make a statement, put something down in writing, whatever, before we kind of close it off this time? Now, usually I'd look over here and Joe or Kim, and here's Kim. No, that's a different one. Joe or BL would tell me, hey, you've got somebody that's got their hand up, and I would indeed. Okay, now here's something from Jan, and I hope I can read it, because sometimes maybe you could speak on the paradox of the vast infinitude also residing in us, but we're not little, see what I mean there, Jan? The vast infinitude, we are the full scope of absolute infinitude already. The us part is a mistaken identity. We are a little emanation, so it seems, but that's just in the world of Maya. So we are, this will get you killed for sure, but we are the absolute deity in the supra-universal world, and we can, and our self-reflection is absolute infinitude. So it's not like the huge, with all of its articulation, parts and pieces, is contained in the tiny. It's not like that, but the essence of the huge and the essence of the tiny are identical, and so in a way it's the same thing. If I'm tiny, my essence is exactly equivalent to the essence of absolute infinitude. And then, of course, now you're into the mathematical problem of the continuum. This is what really got Galileo, and the mathematicians have been trying to solve it, and between any two definite points, a superinfinitude of points exists. Doesn't make any difference how close to each other they are. They have no dimension anyway. So what I'll try to show is that the space between our atoms is illusory. And it's just a fact of, an artifact of perception. So we are the whole thing, the whole shooting match, we're everything. And we contain everything in articulation, and we are everything in non-articulation. Now, what's articulation? In music, if I do staccato, bum, 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 that's called articulated. If I do marcato, ta, 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 that's articulated. It divides one thing from another. Well, that's one of the states of absolute infinitude, but the absolute has no such divisions. So we contain all that, not in our tininess. In our tininess, we are the essence. But in our super vastness, we contain all that. Okay, somewhere in us, that to me is a great paradox, that this great space, because we are, well, and then again, I'm going to try to prove that space does not exist. It's just an artifact of perception, but a necessary artifact over and over again. And unfortunately, I'm not very good at getting this to work out quite right. I can't. What does it say here? Is also part of us. We were created. Also a part of us as we were created. Well, we've never been created. That's the amazing thing. Look, I just give you my point of view, right? We are not creations. We are becomings. The greater I-ness became the lesser I-ness. Nothing created anything in that sense. It became it. The no thing somehow became all other things in the state of division and number. But Blavatsky speaks of something very interesting. She talks about the realm of number and the realm of no number. There's no numbers in absolute zero. And number is illusion. And we became the numbers, and then we retract via the numbers we became and return to the state of no number periodically. And meanwhile, no number has never ceased being no number. So get ready for the paradoxes. They are there. Anyway, we don't contain all the parts and pieces of absolute infinitude, but we are the essence of it. There's only one essence, only one essence. The paradox is that consciousness is infinitesimal point, containing all the universe that is amazing live study, both cosmic fire and beingness of the webinar at the same time. Yeah, it's all, Bruno, it's almost like when you're talking about the big principles, you've got to mix those two things together. Cosmic Fire is probably the Tibetan's most detailed book in terms of parts and pieces and how they all fit together and what they mean to each other. At the same time, unless we have this sense of the ground of all being, underneath it all, the sameness, we're missing, I want to say we're missing the point, but there are no points in absoluteness. Now, that sounds like a funny statement to make, but a point is a being, and there are no separate beings in absoluteness. There's only one beingness, one isness. So anyway, our consciousness, authentically and really, is as vast as it can possibly be, but not appreciated as such in universe. We have to dissolve through the Mahapralaya, you know what I mean, the big disappearance. We have to dissolve through the Mahapralaya, the entire universe, to realize what our consciousness really is. Meanwhile, under the laws of relativity, gradually we keep on expanding our consciousness a little bit more, little bit more, little bit more, and we have a graded series of initiations. Gradualism, that's how we came down, that's how we return. But ultimately, all these things we talk about, consciousness, intelligence, love, etc., the utterness of isness. God, what a phrase that is. The utterness of isness is it all. It is it all, If I can really be, I kind of like that phrase, and just allow me to, it's almost humorous, frankly. But I want to think about this the utterness of isness. That'll give me something to think about, and maybe give you something to think about too. It's when you start dealing with these big things, well, they're not big, they're not little, whatever they are. You just got to find your own language. Otherwise, you may fall into the trap of common sense. You know what I mean by that? All those prejudices that are already in the mind, this is that, this is that. How do you know? Well, you've been taught. And then try to undo your conditioning, and you run into resistance. Part of undoing our conditioning right here is to choose a different language for common things, or maybe uncommon things. Choose a different language and see if it can get behind and around and through. Maybe that would work. Okay, thank you, Bruno. And I think, Anna, you would like to say something, and so I'll lift this, and there you go, you're on. Anna Sklar. You make sure...
Can you hear me? Sorry, hello.
Yes.
Entire universe is like a theater of mirrors, a set of hieroglyphs to decipher. Everything is a sign, everything manifests a mystery, and based on eventually on synchronicity. So the synchronicity is like a black hole or something, and
yes.
in meditation can be reached and manifest like principle of oneness. That and all the astrological influences occurs because of all these different fields based on this oneness, and by rejecting mechanical reactive response to nature, it becomes possible to engage in transformation and gain access to unlimited ranges of energy. In this way, body and consciousness, individual, society, mind and matter may come to achieve their unlimited potential.
Okay, it's a very big and promising picture. And what I want to say, Anna, is that the universal logos is vastly limited, but compared to the energy that we have, we might as well call it unlimited. In other words, the universal logos is itself an infinitesimal, except for its essence, which means, of course, that it's not unlimited. And that's the whole thing about anything in the world of Maya, whether it's the super Maya above the universe or the Maya of the universe. It's all limited, except for the unlimited absolute zero. So, I cannot tell you, I don't know who can, how long a universe may last, or whether they all last at the same time. I don't know. I have the sense of things that it's such a huge number that we might as well relax and enjoy it. We're on our way, and drop our sense of anxiety, because we've done this countless times. You cannot count how many times we have become a universe. And the type of energy infusion that's going to feed the very center of what we are is an incredibly vast thing, even though, from the point of view of absolute infinitude, limited. And a matter of fact, sometime we're going to have to talk about the limited and the unlimited, the bounded and the boundless, because these are fundamental terms that the mind does not usually think of in this way. It doesn't think of them in this way. So I'm going to try to introduce a kind of language where we get a different angle on things, and let's see if it makes a difference. But let's just say that along the way, huge transformations, as you say, do occur compared to our present state. And but that's our present state as a tiny little emanation. There's more to it, and we are the thing from which we came. You know, Anna, I'm going to make a suggestion. Do you have a headset?
No.
May I make a suggestion that you get an economical headset, because it will make what you say and what I say to you audible to the people, because otherwise the extra sounds will blot out many words. So I think for not much money at all, you can get a fairly. I think this cost me $10, maybe $12, something like that.
I will find out about it. I just like this concept of Haramein, Nassim Haramein, the new physics. He says that vacuum is in every atom, and it's like a black hole, and every atom absorbs information. Every atom absorbs information from this vacuum and also radiate it back.
It's true.
So,
it's true. Yeah. And it's all now the fundamental thing we have to grasp at this stage of our studies is we're talking about what's in the universe and what is not in the universe. And that is not something DK got into. He didn't really think maybe it was profitable to do that. But we're talking about the homogeneous substance of beingness, which Blavatsky hinted at. So within the universe, there's all this tremendous variety you're talking about, and the black hole at the center of everything and so forth. And one day we will understand that as completely as possible. But we're also now talking about the journey into absolute reality that occurs when you have a pralaya which wipes out the universe. Anyway, these are deep things, and do your best with a headphone, because it's going to help you and it's going to help us avoid the extra sound that oftentimes wipes out many words. So do what you can, okay? And thank you for your thoughts.
Okay, I will ask my daughter. She knows about these things. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, friends. So look, I know we've gone on here. Must be the night for long webinars, and it's over. What I want to do, maybe in a week we come back. I think we'll be coming back, and as often as possible, I will try to have the group webinar discussion. And sometimes when it's not possible, I will just do some solo thing, and okay, and then you can listen if you wish. You can listen if you wish. You understand that it's a different dynamic. When I was working for years, trying to be exact as possible in print about what the DK said, okay, that became very dense, and maybe not so many people wanted to get into it. I don't know. But now we're talking about things, and we can explain things or give our point of view on the spot. Okay, so now it's a different dynamic, and it gives you more opportunity. Be brave, and be brave when the time comes. And if you want to speak about something, then do speak. And I see my wife has come on. Hey, okay. Tuya, is there anything you would like to say? I don't know how long you've been here, but I know you've been very busy. You're self-muted, and maybe there's nothing you want to say, and maybe you can't talk because it's late here, 1 o'clock at night, and there are people there that are asleep and so forth. But good to see you. Okay, now, friends, we're going to end this discussion on just a few lines of A Treatise on Cosmic Fire. And what I want to do, excuse me, is just do something easy. Easy, seemingly. This is the great invocation. You probably know it. All right, so let's do that together, and that will be the end of our work for tonight. I'll convert this webinar, and I'll convert the Dissipation of Glamour webinar if you're interested, and they will both be on Makara, makara.us, www.makara.us. All these webinars are there, and they may be on YouTube before long. We'll see. All right, so we end with the idea that the three great aspects of divinity make their way into the universe, and they apply to us, to what's going on here on the Earth and in our solar system, and that's what the great invocation is all about, but it can be used on solar systemic levels and beyond, of course. But we want to be practical about it. We have an Earth where there's not enough light, love, or the divine will, and humanity is not yet working the way it should to work out the divine plan, and that's the area of our practical focus. So, great invocation. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Well, I want to thank you all for being here. And some of you very brave ones were here for both of these webinars back to back, so you've been tied up for 5 hours now, roughly. And I'll get all this converted so it can be played on any computer. And then we'll go on tomorrow. Tuya and I have on the night schedule the soul of nations. And that's a big question today, whether it's going to be the personality of nations that manifest and the result will be war, or whether the soul of nations will manifest and the result will be peace. So we'll do that, and then the financial meditation on Sunday, again, late schedule. So we all want to thank you. The whole team thanks you for showing up. And we'll be in touch with you. And look, Cosmic Fire is not an overnight book. You know, I don't think people like you and me can do it in a whole lifetime. But we'll come closer, and that is the point. So many blessings to everyone, and lots of love to you all. And we will all make the grade through our own personal effort and through the assistance of the Master when the time is right. And we will eventually, no matter how many setbacks we may have, we will succeed. So we'll get this up ready for you as soon as possible, and we'll see you before long. Bye-bye.